everyone, this is FideMaster Victor Neustroyev. Today we do our next workshop, and the topic of the workshop is past pawns, targets or heroes or targets. So, first of all, I'm sure you know how to detect whether the pawn is strong or not, when a pass pawn is strong or not. If this pawn is well supported and can be hardly attacked, it's a strong pawn. And that pawn is likely to distract enemy pieces. And that's why you may have advantage because of this passed pawn. If this passed pawn is protected by the other pawn, it's great. If it's protected with pieces, it's still fine. But if it's a far advanced pawn without any support, it's definitely a weakness, and your opponent can take advantage of that. Okay. Okay, so this position from the game between Boris Spassky and Anatoly Karpov looks similar to what Brian played yesterday. Okay, perfect. I hope you played as well as Karpov here. So what do you think about this position? This passed pawn on d6 is a problem for the black's position. What do you think? Well, it's blocked with the knight, which is already good. So, you know, the passed pawns should be blocked. Ideally with a knight, because the knight is among minor pieces. I mean, among all pieces, the knight is the less valuable piece. If they attack our knight, we don't have to move it. We can just defend it. For example, if we blockade it with the rook and they attacked our rook with knight c5, we would have to move the rook. So then the rook isn't a good piece to blockade, but the knight is. Moreover, the knight from d7 is still participating in the place of action. It covers c5, it protects the pawn there, and potentially can maneuver to a different position if it's needed. Okay, what else? So first of all, you need to understand that the pass pawns doesn't occur from nothing. So you can create a passed pawn based on your pawn structure. If you have a pawn majority, then you can just trade some pawns and make your pawn a passed pawn. So, like here in the center, the d pawn became a passed pawn. In this position, what white should be doing? White definitely should try to remove the blockading piece, which is a bit hard. And the key question is what black should be doing, because the black's position is it's restricted. What comes to your mind? Can you suggest a plan? There is no concrete move that allows black to achieve advantage, but there is a plan. Because right now, white cannot progress with their passed pawn. It's successfully blocked by the knight. So Brian suggests to dislodge the knight by doing something like that. Makes sense. Exchanging pieces makes a lot of sense too. Okay, but which pieces to trade? The rooks, the bishops? Actually, if we remove the rooks and the bishops from the board, the pawn becomes weaker. Or maybe just these pieces. Then it's easy to attack such a pawn and take it, after which the endgame can become already winning for black. Okay, so let's discuss the g6 move. I didn't consider this option. So what then? Let's say they play just a random move, and finally we can play f5. But the biggest issue of this move is that they deliver a check. So what now? The king moves.
I actually wanted to see if it was possible to go to d5.
With the king? Okay, yeah, we will check it out. I don't think, but we will check it out. So here, knight h7, and black cannot progress because of these annoying checks. Maybe let's try king d5, which I think is so suspicious. Okay, let me just deliver a check where the king goes. c6. Yeah, c6 is the only position, so it's almost a mate in net. King goes to c6. Well, at the very least, there is another check, and the king has to go back. So black doesn't progress then.
Actually, the check could be blocked there.
With the check can be blocked with bishop on knight c5, which is extremely dangerous. Why do I say so? Who can tell me why am I saying that it's extremely dangerous? Not because of b4, but because of what?
Take c5 and then d7.
d7, yes. So we take on c5 and then d7. That's right. This, and d7. So, well, if the king moves, they lose a knight. The rook is hanging. The rook must move to d8, let's say. And then it's a disaster. So what do
Knight
you think?
f7. Knight f7.
Knight e6.
Knight
Well, knight f7 works too,
Knight takes
actually.
rook takes c5, of course.
Or maybe knight e6 is a better move
Yeah,
because
knight c6 is better, of
you
course.
take everything. But rook c5 seems to be winning too. So king takes, knight here, king d6. What I don't like is that we lose a pawn. If we do knight d6 right away, well, we do lose a pawn too, but well, okay, it's winning anyway. Well, even knight f7 is winning because now the rook is hanging, rook takes, and there is a fork. King moves, and now rook c5 works well.
Yeah.
So all of them are approximately similar. There is no big difference. But blocking on c5 is a disaster. Blocking on c5 with this piece makes no difference. You can trade or you can play d7 right away. So that's why king d5 is a problem, and f5 should be played accurately. So what else? Okay, I'll play the move. And can you answer why it's such a good move? Rook b8 was played in the game.
It's planning b5.
Yes, the plan is b5, to open the b file, to get some counterplay. White continued with rook c4. Now we need to clear the b file, so the bishop goes there. They undermine with f4. We cannot take because of the bishop, obviously. f5 becomes a problem, and let's play g6 because of that. Knight g3. So what do you think in this position white should be doing? Is it already time for b5 or not?
Can you take on f4?
Actually, yes, you can. And this is what was played in the game. But I thought that well, it's possible. I thought that doing this makes more sense. However, there is a check. Now the king goes to d5 because with the bishop on d4, this king can be hardly attacked. Rook goes there and b takes a4. And after rook d7, it's even a takes b3, and one of these pieces has to be sacrificed for the pawn. And the biggest issue of the white's position is that they cannot keep the pawn protected and at the same time advance it. They have to move the rook, leave the pawn hanging, and maybe take the pawn here, or maybe somehow take the pawn on a5. Anyway, most likely the game would
May
end
see
in a,
b4 instead of b4. Just a moment.
instead of what?
Rook c7. Well, knight take.
Here,
And yeah, b4 instead of b4.
instead
Just
of b5, you suggest something else?
no, it's good. Good. Yeah. Go. Yes.
Rook
Rook
c7?
c7. And now
Uh-huh.
b4 instead of
Before, but what your rook
no,
is doing?
you can take, you can no.
Take on
That's
b4?
good because they take in d6. That's very good because now I take on d6.
Yeah, I can take on d6. Yes, right.
But if you take with the bishop on b4, maybe it's better for white.
No, it shouldn't be better for white. So because what, rook b3, rook d8,
Bishop c5.
d7, bishop c.
Wait, no, rook b6. Rook b6.
Rook b6.
Maybe rook b7. Or what about this move?
What if just rook f8?
Then we trade.
Yeah, that's just a draw, right?
Yeah, well, it should be a draw. So that's why I prefer b takes a4, because in my scenario, after b takes a4, there is one more pawn, which potentially provides, well, after b2, the bishop should be sacrificed for sure. There is no other way to stop a pawn from promotion. And the a4, 5 pawn still exists, and that's why it's not a complete draw.
Yeah, but why did you let him take on b3? Why does he have to take the knight?
Well, okay, you want to do this move.
Yes.
Then maybe just this and bishop c5 to take on d6. How to stop it? Rook a7 now. I would even suggest knight here to take the pawn. Even with a rook then. Yeah, so, okay, b5 would be candidate move. In the game, it was e takes f4, rook d4, and f takes g3. And this is where, instead of capturing on g3, white would better activate the rook, rook a4, king d5, rook a7, king c6. What would you suggest? What would you suggest for white in this position? Because, well, black successfully stops the pawn.
g5.
Yeah, play g5. Because after that, the king can easily stop all the pawns. So, for example, rook a3, well, white can definitely draw the games.
Why rook e3? Just let the king do it.
Let the king do it. Okay. Then I don't want to hang the pawn on b3. So, because if the king does it, it's b5, b takes, and rook comes to b3 with a check.
So rook e5 is better. Rook e5.
There is a knight.
Oh, no, you can't do that.
So the knight.
Isn't rook g7 interesting?
F takes g5, rook g7 is more interesting. Okay. I gonna do b5 anyway.
Now we can take in g6 and
Uh,
defend d6 pawn too.
yes, but you see that you cannot progress. So let's say I take there.
They're gonna take with a check, no?
To take what with a check?
Never mind.
Okay, let me see. Maybe I want to play. No. So okay, I take, pawn takes, and then this. The bishop is hanging, so bishop c1 is the only move. I don't know. Maybe it's okay. So how do I play g4?
You should bring the rook to g8 and like c. And I want to bring the rook to c7. Somehow to attack the knight.
It's impossible. How do you bring it to c7? So rook a3 with this idea, maybe. Well, rook a3 and then b5, you can deliver a check.
And king d5, and there's no progress because rook c7 and then, oh, okay.
Still the same story. So rook d7, a takes, and the bishop should be sacrificed. And, well, White has to draw the game here. He will be so many pawns down, but it is a draw because triple pawns on the G file are easy targets.
Wow.
Okay. Okay, so rook e3, in my opinion, is the most safe move because the b3 is protected and the king can capture there. So today we studied our workshop a little earlier for Europeans because of the time shift. So in the United States, we're gonna stick uh, to to the time in the East Coast of America. But I hope that soon these time shifts due to daylight. I mean, okay, I'm sure that in 1 year, maybe next year, there will be no time shifts because well, the vast majority doesn't like it. Anyway, well, we gonna shift back when well, actually, the time shift in Europe is in the last in the last Sunday of March. And it means that, for example, that workshop that will be conducted in the last Sunday of March for Europeans gonna start at 5 p.m. Central European time. Okay, so yeah, that's a draw actually. That's a draw. King g3 was played, and that was a mistake. It's a natural move, but g5 was required. Why this move isn't the most accurate one? How can we take advantage of that?
Can we do b5? Can we go
G5, of course.
G5, actually, yeah. But before that, rook c8. David suggested b5. Let's take a look at this move. I think there is rook d3, and the game, it's a drawish position. The knight cannot move. So passed pawn here with g5, f5. So it's better to play g5 and keep the position more complicated. But before doing it, let's create a threat. They defend, and now g5. So let's decide how we're gonna play for a win. So let's say bishop b2. Well, they could just play a random move. What is our strategy again? Of course, we can play rook c2, but what it allows us to do? Rook c2, bishop goes back to a3, or maybe bishop to c3.
what about knight c5 here?
d7. Then you just take on d7, of course. Okay, knight c5. Well, knight c5. What else? Rook. d7. Maybe just rook f3 in this position. Or just this, actually. And once white simplifies, he can successfully fight for a draw. But I like the idea. So the game continued with b6, with the idea to secure the c5 square as well as to protect the pawn. Once the knight is here, that's fine. The pawn isn't a weakness. Bishop d4, rook c6, threatening to take with a rook, because a minor piece in game is very likely winning for black. So bishop c3. So here, capturing doesn't guarantee a win because of simplification. So b4, how does it work? If, let's say, it's a takes before, bishop before king, for example, goes further, it's a5, and the knight is tied down to stop this path pawn. That's why it's not winning. This is what Karpov didn't want to do. If here he did b5, which could make sense, it's b takes a5, b takes a4, and again the bishop stops this pawn, and the passed pawn on the a file distracts the knight, and bishop becomes stronger than a knight if it comes to two-side play. That's why rook c5 first, king g2, some repetition, and finally knight e5. If in case of this trade, the position is losing. This trade did happen, and well, it was still possible to fight for a draw with king f2 move, but then the pawn is lost and black is definitely playing for a win, but who knows, maybe white could stop it. But they decided to start a counterplay with this move. Obviously, anything else like this completely fails, because rook goes there, rook takes, and white doesn't even have a chance to attack the pawn on b6. For example, rook c3, rook c6, rook d6. The pawn in game is 100% losing. So that's why b4, to open the position, to trade pawns and create a counterplay. What do you think? Should we take?
Rook c4. No. Wait, no.
Rook c4, d7. So what if we take? What was the purpose of this move?
He probably wants
to play rook b3.
But that loses there. So yes, to play rook b3 actually, but rook b3 in this position is a quick loss. If we stop it that way, okay, no, well, if we take, they play d7, then rook d8, and now rook b3 works. Wait, is rook b3 the best move? Yes, I think so. Rook d7, rook b4. The b6 is a weakness. They can deliver a check, but then they have to retreat back to stop it. And, well, let's actually do it. King f2, rook goes back, and rook b5, a5. That's the plan. It's hard to progress. So let's say rook b5 first. And it's hard to find a good move. Okay, let's go back. But if we play e4, it changes everything. There was still a possibility for white to draw the game if he did this. Now rook d8 takes on a5 and this move. So that once we take, rook f5 is a double attack, and the king is in time to stop the pawn in case of
rook
a3.
d5.
Here, rook d5,
Yeah.
but rook f8. That will be checked from behind. This is a weakness. So check here, king f2. Rook e5. Okay, rook e5 gonna lead to checks from behind. But before doing it, let's first blockade the pawn and then start checks from behind. So e3, king e2. The key idea is to trade and then capture on e3. So maybe I rushed with e3, but what to play? This move.
What if you play king e7 to stop the check?
Makes a lot of sense. Well, just rook here, let's say. e3, king e2, so it's still possible to draw the game. So an extra pawn in the rook and games doesn't guarantee a win. However, many of the endgames can be winning. And after rook d4, the position was actually winning. Can you please answer why? What's wrong with this exact move?
If they're rook d8,
Rook d8, rook e4.
and then you just take with the king.
But then rook d4, and this is a trade, and this is a draw.
Oh, because the king is powerful, or yeah.
Isn't forced king e5.
Yes, it's because king e5 is a forcing move, so the rook cannot move. What they should do? Well, they played rook d1, but the king was already on a5, and that makes a big difference. The black progressed. Maybe d7 is a move that deserves attention. What do you think?
Can you just do rook d8?
You can do rook d8. So let's say they must make a rook move somewhere on the d file. So rook here. And then you take there. And this is winning. Too many extra pawns. This pawn is an easy target. I don't even think that we should capture it. Maybe we should move the king to capture it. We shouldn't. We may just advance one pawn and then just win. So, for example, how to play? Well, let's say king. Maybe. Well, okay.
Wait.
Rook b1 maybe. What else? Rook b4. Check. King moves. And oh well.
Rook e3.
Rook a3. Okay. Rook a3. Rook b6. Rook a4. And this should be winning because this is a weakness. So even if the king goes there to stop it, there will be check, after which the king invades and the second pawn is lost. This is how it works. So, well, they played rook d1. A takes b4, and you see how black realizes their advantage. So rook c3 to chase the king away. And in this position, king d6 doesn't work so well, but it seems that black is also winning. So this double attack, king a5, rook b6, but after rook f3, it seems that the king goes to the back rank, the rook attacks this pawn, the king captures that pawn, so it's still winning. However, rook d3 is a better move, because after that we managed to save everything. So rook b4, rook d6, for example. If they play d7, well, rook d7, rook b4, and again, it's the same story. Rook goes there, king e3, check. And then we can play rook a3, similar to what we had before. This is a winning position. So this capture, and this is a weakness. They cannot even defend it. Well, technically they can with this move, but then it's a check and the rook straight, and then we win it. So what I wanted to show you, what about rook b5 check? Okay, where? Here? No, maybe after rook b6, rook a4, rook b5 check, king f4. Okay, yes, and you cannot play rook f5. Well, you can, but then you lose a pawn. After rook a3, okay. So rook a3, rook b5 check, king f4. What does it change? Not really much. Rook b4 back. This is what you want to play. Okay, I think you're gonna lose soon because of that. So where does the king go? Well, let's say one, king f3. And once I do that, I'll be threatening with mate. So sooner or later, you have to take on b6, and then I take on a4.
Well, if he takes on b6, can you play e3?
No, because then I'm gonna receive checks from behind.
And then you take on d4?
Well, yes, you can, but it's still winning, right, because of the g pawn. But don't you think it's better to take there and then win this pawn?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Doesn't it work rook a1 instead of one a4 pawn?
Instead of taking the pawn on a4, in which position? So rook b6. You said what? Rook a1. Rook a1 with a3 idea. Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. So
No,
d2,
because
e3.
e3, king d3.
There is a check, and after that
Oh,
check it's e2, and nothing can stop from a promotion. But, well, they gonna sacrifice their rook. Well, it's still winning. Yes, it works. It's still winning because they gonna sacrifice the rook, and maybe then we have to sacrifice our rook for the a pawn, but we take on g4, and we have at least one more pawn to promote it. So let's go back. What I wanted you to remember from this game that, well, it doesn't seem that this pawn is a weakness on d6, but it is successfully neutralized with the knight. which means that black can start be looking for a counterplay. And the weakness, a potential weakness in this position is b3. So this seems to be a very logical plan to open up the position and activate the rook, because the knight is enough to blockade the pawn on d6. It cannot be attacked because there is a king protecting it. In order to Yeah, it's a, well, in order to play for a win, white should open up the position and invade the seventh rank with their pieces. But even this doesn't guarantee a win. It's definitely a tough plan to play rook b8. But if you have the enemy pawn successfully blocked, think about a counterplay. Well, and where, if not on the b file? You cannot play rook h8. There is nothing you can do on the h file. So you cannot occupy the c file because your opponent controls it. You can play this move, but then you let rook c7, so which attacks the pawn. That's why you can come up with the idea of doing this and then b5, so that you open the b file and attack the weakness, or at least activate your rook. Okay, fine. Well, the next example is the middle game. It's white to move in this position. The game was played by Alexander Alekhine. White to move. There are no passed pawns, but as you learned, the passed pawns occur by initiating changes in the pawn structure. We have a pawn on c6. The c7 pawn is also pinned, and this is what we may take advantage of. Now let's decide what to do.
And we try to do bishop b3 to sacrifice the bishop on b6.
Okay, bishop e3 does create a threat. Okay, makes sense. How does our opponent play? I wonder if
move the queen away from the pin.
moving the queen away, but there is still a pin.
Oh.
So maybe they can play f4, bishop b6 anyway, and maybe, I don't know, f3? What do you
No,
think?
take on g3. Take on g3.
If you take on
Oh,
g3.
then there's rook
Okay,
c6.
I see what you mean. So you want to play rook f2, but
Yeah.
it seems to not work because the queen is lost anyway. There is a check. Oh, there is bishop d4. That's tricky. Yeah, bishop d4. Okay, but the king doesn't have to take it. It's possible to play this move. Then the pawn is lost. Yes, it's a nice strategy. I think white is winning here. Bishop e3. But bishop e3 is probably the worst among winning options. It's still winning, but it's the worst winning scenario. So the knight on b8 is also not participating in the game, while the bishop on d5 is quite powerful. h5. Well, h5 seems slow. h5. So h5, g5, e takes f5. Okay, fine. h5, bishop f4. This is what I don't like. So this, if king takes, it's that as a discovered attack. So that's why king g7. G takes. And now what? Well, it's still...
You're planning to go for e5 here in this position, which is dangerous for black.
I think even this is a good move.
For that.
Then rook c7, and the only idea is to stop rook e7 blocking it. If we can manage it, then it's a checkmate. Okay, so let me just illustrate a certain scenario. I play a random... Okay, which random move to play? Now let's say this. And the king escapes. Okay, so I don't know. There is no such a move. Okay, let's say in this position, e takes f5 is played, queen e1, rook c7. So king goes there, it's this. Then what? We promote to...
No, no.
No, wait,
Rook h7 is mad.
Rook h7 is mate? Yeah, rook h7 is mate. Okay, but I wanted to do this. It's a mate too. After, yeah, still rook h7. Yeah, I just wanted to show you how the knight can
Nice.
deliver checkmate. Also, promoting to a knight, king moves knight g6. Another checkmate. Okay, yes, but this is the move. This. For this move, I prepared this because it distracts the queen. If queen takes, this time the king escapes to f6, so it fails. Okay, it fails.
There's still a perpetual check.
Oh well, we want to play for a win. At least we can use that line that David suggested with bishop e3.
Yeah.
Okay, so what we were talking about? h5, bishop f4, h takes king g7. So, and I don't know if it's winning. Okay, well, h5 is a possible move. But why you guys don't suggest the more simple move? This, and there is a pin that they cannot get rid of.
Oh, and after takes, pawn takes, you have c5, b takes c5, b6.
We can go over it. Okay, so Brian, sorry, I didn't notice that you suggested capturing on f5. Fine. So which piece do they take? Well, taking with the rook. Take, take, take. Then what?
Why? Why take it? Wait, can you go back with rook when it's rook takes c5, rook takes f5? Here, why can't you play c5 in this position? Oh, wait, the rook protects on. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, if this move, then. Oh, okay. Bishop a5, rook a5. This they cannot take with their queen because of rook c7. D takes e5, and there is c5 at the very end. That's right. How does it work? The idea is to play b6 then. Well, actually, g takes a5, and I'm sure you can find the next move. It was c5. Similar to the other lines. Why c5 this time? It's even stronger because after d takes e5, you can take on a5, win a piece, and then win the game. So b takes c5. B6. Rook c8 is the only move to defend because I don't see anything else. Well,
B7.
sacrificing the knight.
B7.
B7. Well, b7, but with b7 you move your rook out of the place of action, so they can move their rook back. Why do you suggest b7, Samir?
Okay.
Oh, it looks like it may still work with rook a1 and rook
Then what?
a8.
Rook a8? Well, how does rook a8 help? Because it's protected many times.
Is g4 move or is that just stupid?
I'll end up putting I can triple up on the a file if there's time. Put the queen on a7 and win everything.
Okay, so Brian, first of all, it's not an easy task because if you move the rook there, well, of course you hang the rook, but even if not, what if they start a counterplay on your king? Well, not with rook g8, but with queen h4. Well, you can start with this move. Let's say, okay, they, for example, unpin, then what? Queen a2?
Well, they're ready to attack your king, so why don't you go like bring
I
the queen
think
to
here
f2?
take the bishop and play g4 maybe. Well, here we have to take one more time, of course, and I think
This is hanging.
bishop's hanging.
So Then maybe I can do this to add more pressure. Well, no, I don't want to give up it. So, well, anyway, it looks like a very like side play with b7 because it's everything there. Why do we release this tension with b7? Yes, the pawn is closer to the queen square, one more step, but there is a knight, and it's hard to get rid of this blockading piece. You can hardly attack it, only with a rook, and our rooks can defend it. Okay, so here I want you to find a deadly move that decided the game.
Is there like bishop g5 or something? If takes, you bring the rook to h1 and attack from the h file.
Bishop takes. Okay, so bishop g5 takes. Okay, I don't know how it works because how can you attack? You can attack with one rook, but the king is on g7, and then you don't attack.
It doesn't work.
Okay, let me read what people say. Queen b2 or queen d2. Queen d2 is not clear for me. Maybe just to attack on h6, but queen b2, yes. In the game, it was played queen c3. With the
Why
same idea.
do queen c3?
To add pressure on e5. Because
Yeah,
capturing it
but
leads to disaster. What did you want to say?
why does queen c3 and queen b2? Is there a difference or
I don't think there is a difference. They are similar.
I like a bit more queen b2 because of after in same variation I can take in c7 with the pawn b6 for c7.
But it's in both cases it's possible. Okay, so let's see how it works. Takes, check. So then what? If this move, you just take there and this is winning. For example, they take and the knight is trapped at the very least. If the king moves, still the same story. The h6 is hanging. It's over. What else they can play? They play this move in the game, and this is a losing strategy too. So bishop f5, d takes e5. How to continue?
rook takes c7? No, pawn takes pawn.
Okay, try to think first.
No, rook takes. Rook takes
Where? c7 or e5?
Yes, c7.
E5.
Okay, so
Pawn takes.
queen takes.
Queen takes c5. Isn't this just completely winning?
No.
No, queen c5.
Ah, c5. Okay. Well, this position maybe. So what do I do? F4?
I prefer black.
No, I don't like it as much.
I prefer black in this position.
Black in this position because of what? Maybe because of rook c? No. Not sure actually. Well, actually not sure that black is losing here. Maybe not actually. This is a weakness. Maybe 4 is a move. How white wins? Well, white can win if he does that, right? So can I stop it with this move, let's say? Not sure. Queen c6, queen e7. Oh, it's a check. No, it works. It works. Yeah, so no, it doesn't guarantee a win. It should be something else. So Brian said rook e5 in this position. That's right, but not rook e5, queen e5. Why? Because then the black's actions are limited. They have to accept it. With rook e5, they may not take but move their queen, for example. After queen e5, they have to. because the queen also attacking c7. So something like that absolutely fails, for example. So queen e5, if they took the queen, then they have to take the rook too. And now rook c7, check. And because it's a check, this must be a trade. And after this trade, we have two ways of how to promote our pawn. That's why the only thing they can do is to play rook e8. Who can tell me how she... Huh?
Bishop e6.
Knight c6?
Take the knight and then bishop e6.
Yeah, take the knight and then bishop e6, because there is no way to stop c7. So let's see. Check here makes no sense. So this move c7, and this is completely winning. So what did happen in this game? After a few changes, we created a pin and made our c5 move stronger. D takes c5 is no longer a possibility. And because we distract the b pawn, we can advance the b5 pawn to b6, add pressure there, and try to promote these two pawns. That was the key idea. And this idea was at the same time was combined with the activity on the king side and the fact that the enemy king was weak. If the king was supported with the pawns, let's say if we, for example, add two more pawns to g7 and g6, I would say black is fine. But with the king being weak, they are in a huge trouble. So having one weakness on the queen side is not enough. There, in order to win, you usually have to combine several types of advantages. So the enemy king's position is one advantage of your position, and the passed pawn, or the ability to create a passed pawn, was the second one. Okay, now I would like to present a really weird position with a what? A weird material balance. Two knights, two pawns versus queen. Before we continue, let me remind you one thing. So we have two games to analyze more, but I would like to let you know that we are going to start a new cycle of group lessons on Friday, the 20th of March. This cycle of group lessons will be devoted to openings. We are not going to learn a concrete opening, but we are going to learn how to understand openings that you play and how to build an opening repertoire. These are group lessons, and they are quite similar to the workshops I'm conducting, but this time we will be absolutely focused on openings only. So this cycle of group lessons has a certain goal inside. It's not just random topics that can help you overally. It's for those who struggle with openings, for those who, for example, place the opening they play and sometimes finds in a difficult situation, not without a plan or in a worse position.
Is it to be like what you teach your students, like what openings you teach them?
No, so everyone can, well, you learn certain principles that you will be able to apply to your own opening repertoire. It's not like the openings that I play or I teach my students to play. So you will be able to implement this knowledge to any openings that you have in your opening repertoire. So it's a practical course. You will, well, you'll see. This is the plan, for example. Oh, wait, it's actually, no. I think this is a plan from the previous course. No, not this one. Maybe it wasn't refreshed. Okay, so this consists of 12 lessons. Let me show you. Let me show you what we are going to cover. It's here. So this is the plan of the course. These 12 lessons. So what the openings are about, understanding the center, pawn structures, development, move order. So when it's time to break the center, well, how you from the opening transition to the middle game. What if your opponent, instead of playing a certain opening, just uses a certain strategy, for example, London or like modern defense? So there is also some of the lessons will be devoted to middle game strategies. And two last lessons will be devoted to your own opening repertoire. We will be, first of all, I'll provide you with a few tips of how to build your own opening repertoire. Second, we're gonna do a practical, well, lesson where based on the openings you play and based on the positions you usually get, you made mistakes that should be fixed to improve your opening repertoire. So the next lesson will be up to you. So you're gonna send me your examples and we're gonna work on it. It consists of 12 lessons, not 8 like it shows here. So I'm gonna change this page. Maybe it's because I didn't update cache of the browser. That's why we see these old topics. Yes, what else? The rate, it's for the full course, it's 129. If you divide it to 12, it's like how many? Around $10 per lesson, per 1 hour and 30 minutes class. Well, it's really cheap. Also, if you miss a class, well, this time we decided that the classes will be at 4 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, which means what, 10 p.m. No, not, yeah, it's 10 p.m. Central European time. So some Europeans can join us too. It's not too late. And well, I will be conducting the class when it's 10 p.m. my time. And there will be recordings. If you missed a class, you will receive the recording anyway. And then you can complete the homework and also send questions or ask them at the very next class. So here it shows what happens if, well, you don't really need anything just to join the class at a certain time. There will be a separate Zoom link, which will be sent only to those who gonna participate in this cycle of group lessons. And it's, well, it's mainly for club players from 12 to 18. So I think it's like FIDE rating. So if you are under 1800 FIDE, you'll definitely find this course helpful. And of course, you're gonna get PGNs that we're gonna cover. They will be annotated. Fine.
Like 1800 on the dot. Is that still fine?
Yes, especially for you because because Samir, you not always play the opening properly.
Yes.
And if the position if such a position that you don't know occurs, very often you get lost of what you should be doing. For example, today, well, I see your plan with knight before queen c5 attacking the pawn on c2 was good, but look at your other pieces. They were completely not doing anything. And because of that, you later experienced issues and missed this f5, f6 feature. Okay, anyway, let's continue with our main topic of the workshop, I mean, past pawns. Let me send you the link. So the link is here in the chat. Fine. Okay, this is the position that we have. Well, actually, if you look at this position, you can decide that black is in a trouble, which is true. Because the pawn is already advanced to f7, two knights support them.
If I was white, I would play knight e6 and then... Oh.
You cannot, David. You lose on f7 then. And actually, it's black to move. Yeah, of course, I like the white's position. White should be winning. And black uses their only chance. They play a3 here. Well, we take, otherwise they promote. We take, why not? And what do you think? Huh?
You sack the knight next.
Well, how?
If king takes, you just take on b3 with the knight.
I don't have to. I can do it at the very last moment on b1.
Okay.
If the king takes, which wasn't played in the game, how do you win? What do you think?
e3 looks reasonable. I mean d3,
d6,
d6,
d6, yes, d6, queen f8.
and d3. No.
E6. Okay, but not yet. King f5 first, and
Yeah.
then knight h7 f8. Oh, no. Then let's say they play b2. King g6, knight h7. So to avoid, okay, so Samir, your topic, simplification. I'll show you. Knight c4, king b3, knight b2, and then with this strategy we win.
Yeah.
So I decided to sacrifice the knight to avoid any future problems in case if I miss something or in case if the queen can move and deliver several checks, neutralize my knight. I'd better sacrifice it right away for that pawn, and then knight h7 f8 just wins the game. There is no perpetual check. Fine. So that's why the king has to go to c3. d6 anyway, queen goes there. And what do you think how to play?
Sack the knight. Sack the knight on b3.
On b3.
Yeah.
Okay, so what? King takes b3.
And king c4. King f5.
So it's still winning.
Yeah, duh.
Maybe.
What?
You can sack the knight and then can you push? No.
e6? No, you cannot. You lose on d6.
Can
With
you
it,
push this
d7?
d7 and then do knight e6?
No, then f5 is taken with a check. So, and actually it's not so winning.
Check.
King c4, the king comes closer. That's why, Samir, I think you sacrificed on b3 too early. Well, this should be the move, or this, like it is, like it was played in the game. So the knight on d2 still covers the b1 square. So, okay, why did I sacrifice the knight in that scenario like that? Because I see that with king g6, knight h7, there is nothing they can do to stop. Why I prefer to not sacrifice the knight in this situation? Because it takes more time for me to play these moves and knight h7, and maybe the enemy king comes to d5 and it's not winning. Maybe they take my pawns. There is also queen g7. Okay, fine. So knight g4, check. King goes to d3.
Now
Now
you
this.
can push. Yeah.
Now you can push. Yes, it was you won the tempo, defended there, and now you can push. Queen h6. Black who is hoping for a perpetual check. Now, king f5. Of course, we want to progress with the king. They play b2. And it seems that the vast majority of chess players here would continue with e7. Am I right?
Yes.
It
Yeah.
seems there's a problem with that, though.
It seems there is a problem. Which problem? Okay.
Let's
Queen
see.
takes
So,
e2.
queen d2. Does it work? Queen d2
Queen
and then make
d2.
yeah, queen d2, knight d2, king d2. Let's say you promote. I promote with a check on b1. I'm not sure what's happening there. Looks like black draws.
No.
No, I don't think black draws. So let's say which move to play, f8 or e8.
Let's
I
go
think
f.
Yeah, I guess white's winning.
white is winning, so there is a pawn. So b1. I wonder if
Can you block with the queen?
queen e4 works. Yes, because if queen f1, I have this. If this move, which is the one they check, I have king f6. No, king e6. And then king e7, and then I promote. Because how you can deliver a check? Queen b3, queen d5, cross check. So this, then king e7, and this is the next move. That's why it's winning. So queen d2 doesn't work. Okay. But if you play e7, they can play queen h7. Let's say this. b1 equals queen.
Queen b5 check. Queen g4 check.
Queen h3, yes, something like that.
Why not g4?
I
You
don't
can
think there
just give him perpetual check, right?
Yes, this is a perpetual check.
No, maybe you can even win. Oh no. Wait, can you try to, after the king goes to d5?
e5.
No.
So when queen h7, king f6, promote, another check, check this, and I stop this coming. There was also a very nice line that I wanted to illustrate. I'm gonna show it a little later. Okay. Fine. So let's continue. Well, e7, it's 7, and then queen h7, and this is a perpetual check. Like that, king e6, queen h3, so there will be checks. And I don't think they can escape to d5.
You can
Yeah.
do queen of 5 and now
Here.
just take the pawn on f7.
Maybe it's better to deliver a check, because taking the pawn means they can play king d7 or even knight bc3. So it's better to keep checking because they cannot escape. This, but I still have that. If he goes back, then this again. So it is a perpetual check, but it's not easy to find. That's why e7 wasn't played. Instead, it was played d7. You may say that it's easier to stop the pawns by just taking the control over the dark squares. But how? Queen f8. And what do you think? How white played? Okay, so Brian probably means not a2 but a4. Yes, a4. This is what was played in the game because the queen is absolutely helpless. So queen e8, e7. It's not the very end. This king f6. Queen d4. Where to move the king? So we have two candidates. f5 leads to a repetition. Oh, f5 leads to queen d7 check, maybe. e6 or g6. Let's vote. Who agrees that we should move our king to e6? So let's say blue and green. Okay, Carlos says king g6. Fine.
King g6.
So everyone thinks that king g6. Can you please explain why?
I think king g6 to get the king closer to the pawns.
Well,
Maybe
okay.
try to get the king to maybe to e8, so when the queen checks me, then I can just promote. Stop it.
Okay. So let me show you something. So in the game it was king e6 played, and the game ended in a draw. So king g6 was a winning move. And then what? Well, there are no checks. Which checks can be delivered? Queen g1 or queen b6? But in both cases, it's possible to move the king away, and that's it. Well, in case of queen g1, for example, which is a check, we should do what?
We should block it with a knight.
Knight g5. Yes, I think we can do so. And in this move, we can go there. Because if now, let's say they take, then we already promote with a check, and then we can stop his fast pawn, promote several queens. So it's gonna work. King g6. Well, okay. b1 equals queen. d8 equals queen. This queen is pinned. Queen b6 is the only possibility. Queen g1 is a move, but queen g1 it's knight g5.
Queen g1 is not a move
Why?
because it's. Oh, I thought you said the.
No, one queen is pinned, the other one.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, queen b6. So queen b6, king h5, check. And after that, these checks are over. And of course, one of the pawns will be promoted. So just one queen with two knights can defeat a queen. But there will be two queens, maybe even. Well, king g6 should be played. Instead, in the game, it was played king e6. Now b1 works. Knight b1, queen e4 check, king f6, queen h4. It seems that the king escapes, right? But there is a perpetual check. This. How does it work if then they can promote and block it? There is a check from there. This is a repetition. So that's why the only way is to move the king. But then the king can attack through the other side symmetrically. This move, again, queen h5. So king c8 is the only option. Queen c5.
Why not queen h a1?
a8.
A8.
Then the king escapes. Because at a certain moment, if the king, let's say, escape here, they start doing cross checks. So you'd better eliminate this option. Queen c5. King here, queen there. And it's a repetition, so they cannot escape from these checks.
You also don't want to get mated.
I don't think it's possible to get mated.
I think it is.
So this. Why? Well, to keep delivering checks from a5 and then h5. So this is how the game ended. Elikine managed to draw the game. Oh no, it was Lasker. So Edward Lasker.
But
so
not Emmanuel. That's his brother, right?
Yeah, I don't know if he was a brother or not, but that's not the world champion. It's a different one. Okay, so you see, several connected pass pawns can be stronger than a queen, especially if they are supported with some pieces. That was shown in the. Finally, we have the last one, which is really tough. So it's white to move. White has two types of advantages. So what do you think? Which advantages I'm talking about?
The bishop pair and most all of his pawns is on the dark squares, and you have a dark squared bishop.
But your pawns are on the light squares, and they have a light squared bishop, so they very distant. Oh, thanks, Brian. Thanks for explanation. So these Laskers were relatives. The H pawn, that's right, a bishop pair and the outside passed pawn. However, you can easily draw the game if you trade this bishop for the knight. This is what I don't recommend. If white wants to play for a win, this should be avoided. Okay, fine. How to play? No, let me show you. So this, if you decide to take, which is a bad idea, it's gonna be a draw. Well, they're gonna bring the king to g7, g8, I mean. The bishop will be on that diagonal, and then you won't be able to progress.
But what about all the pawns on the dark squares for the bishop?
How does the bishop access that side?
Yeah.
You also have to keep an eye on your pawns. So that will be a draw. If, let's say, the pawn structure was different, then this bishop could capture the pawns, but not here. So this is what you shouldn't do. Trading this could make a lot of sense, but in some situations it is winning, in some not. It may be winning if you then trade these bishops and can advance your passed pawn, which will distract the enemy king. Then your king invades the enemy territory here or here and takes the pawn on d6, and this is how it's winning. Okay, so Piero thinks that white should bring the king to g5. Okay, fine. Yes, it's right, but how? Bishop f3, I think they won't trade. Bishop g6 will be played. h5, bishop h7. Okay, so in order to restrict and let your king pass, it makes sense to start with f5. This is a very important move that wins the tempo. No, not wins the tempo, wins the space. This is what I wanted to say. So you gain space and you want to invade g5. Why not bishop f3? Bishop g6. h5, bishop h7. And how, maybe even, am I missing anything? Ah, actually, yes. I think in case of bishop f3, they can take and play 5 themselves. Okay, that's the reason. And you cannot progress. 96, and the king doesn't go to g5 anymore. So bishop g4, there is no time for bishop g4. Bishop g4 after bishop h7, yes, but after bishop f3 it can be a trade, and with f5 black king gets activated, the white king doesn't invade the enemy territory, and the bishop neither. So f5, knight f5. What do you think? Maybe we should take?
Well, I was looking at b4 in some lines.
Well, b4 at the moment can be ignored.
Can we take and go f6 to bring the bishop to f5 and walk the king up to e4 and win that pawn on e5?
Can you please explain again how? So take, then
f6
bishop f6 with the pawn, and then the king goes there.
and then bishop f5 check. Oh no, I missed king d6.
Well, maybe you can then trade. What do you think about this position?
It's probably winning actually.
It's black is winning because this is a protected pass pawn. So they're gonna stop your pawn, but your king has to keep an eye on the e pawn. Well, actually, if white plays accurately with the king on g4, they can draw the game. But it could be an easy loss if white makes a
Can
simple
white
mistake.
try to get the pawns? Like, can white try to do king d4, king d5, or
Okay, yeah, David, but they cannot progress. So even if they can invade to d6 or c6, every time it's e4 and the e pawn will be promoted faster. So you can access d5, but it doesn't help you to win. And if you leave the h pawn hanging, you may even lose. Okay, fine. So no, trading doesn't work. But f6 with the idea of gaining space and activating the king works. Knight g6. The pawn is hanging, so we defend it. Knight f8. Knight goes there. Bishop g3 attacking the pawn, so they have to defend it with the king move. Bishop f5 check, and this is how the knight becomes pinned. This is the key. Just bishop moves, bishop d1. So it looks like a fortress. But how to defeat such a fortress? What do you think?
Breaking the fortress.
How to break the fortress? On the queen side or
a6 b5 for black.
Black can play 6b5 if they want. If they want to play for a win, for example, they can do so. But here I would say that their task is just to survive. Approach with the king. How?
My idea was bishop f4, bishop g5, and then push the h pawn. Well, no, we can't push it right away, but maybe we can. Well, maybe bishop g2, bishop f3. With the idea, if they don't take, that to play bishop e2 with king f3, and then use the king to help escort the h pawn.
Yeah,
Or if
okay.
they
So
move, we can even push the h pawn right away there. Yeah.
okay, so
I
if you play
understand it breaks the
this,
pin.
they can do that, yes. And now bishop f3 cannot be played. And they're gonna do knight f5, for example, at some point. So, okay,
It
what else
still
do
might
we...
work. I don't know.
Okay.
I have to keep calculating. Because
So
can the
how
king
does
go
it
to
work?
f4 now?
Can the king go to e6?
And then g5. I guess there might be some fork. Not yet. Looks
Let's say
possible. I'm
knight
not sure.
f3.
I think we can afford to take it and play h5, but I'm not sure.
I don't think so. So how do you win? Let's say they do what? D5? Because if you play h6, it's just bishop f4 that stops it.
I
So
missed
you
that.
have to advance the king first. But you cannot. If you advance the king first, you leave the pawn hanging.
So here maybe we take the pawn on d5 and then play bishop c8.
B8.
Sorry.
This is how you only let them to create a passed pawn. So the problem is that you cannot progress with such a pawn configuration. For example, h6, this, and the pawn is completely stopped. King h6, okay, let's say b5, king h6, okay, I play something, king g7, that's too late, the h5 is hanging, so that's why there is no way to progress after getting the king to g5 and the pawn on h5. So let's go back. Maybe we can find a better way to play. Well, king e4 can be played, but not clear what for. What I want you to see here that, for example, something like king c7 is a blunder. The f pawn will be promoted, so the king must be close to e6. This is one thing, which means that they cannot get rid of the pin. Which of your pieces require improvement? The king too, but
The king, I feel like the king wants to be on d5 right now.
Then bishop 3 mate.
Oh.
So, well, on the one hand, I see the idea of centralizing the king, but the king there is the object of the attack. But it's not even clear for me. Why king to d5? You want to win the pawn on d6? Yeah, but it's hard to execute because the king is vulnerable.
So where do you want to put the dark square bishop on?
This
like,
is the biggest question. Where do you want to bring the dark squared bishop here? How can you improve it?
E7 is possible.
So to
I don't
e7,
know if
because
it's
where
good,
else?
but
Where else?
it protects the pawn.
What? That's a blunder. Oh
No,
no.
the knight was pinned. It wasn't a blunder. The knight was pinned. That's why the knight couldn't take anything.
But why is
Okay.
the bishop so good on that square? That's what I don't get. I don't think it's that good. Like, what does it do?
On e7.
The pressure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you'll see how this bishop worked a little later. So a5 was played. Well, then maybe they can play something else, but a5 doesn't make the repetition worse. King f2. This is where they better play a4, but they played bishop d1. I don't think it's big difference, but bishop d1 loses faster. King g3. What is the threat?
Bishop g4.
Bishop g4 is a threat, right? So, for example, yeah, if they just keep bishop here, we do that. They play this, we play that, they do that. And this is winning because this and this. And if they move the king, they lose there. And there is no other way to defend the pawn. So bishop g6, for example, loses. Okay, so they play a4. Pawn takes, bishop takes. This bishop goes back to c2. Well, we can invade the d5 square, but then once this bishop delivers a check, such a check becomes checkmate.
Oh.
So it's too early. So h6, bishop goes back, bishop g4, bishop h7, and now I want you to think about the plan. So because it still looks like a fortress. However, I can declare that the black pieces are completely tied down. The king is tied down to the knight. The bishop
Why
is tied down to the h pawn.
is bishop h5 not completely winning?
There was something wrong with this move. Oh, they can unpin. That was,
And then you take. Oh.
yeah, something. Oh, actually, no. This and then takes on h6.
Oh.
So yes, you should maintain this pin. What's the winning plan? It's not an easy task.
Well, I think we can bring the king to the queen side. So maybe
Right.
for that.
The king to the queen side to attack b6 because the enemy king is tied down. So they cannot take the pawn on a2 because we promote. d5 finally. Because what else? We're gonna do this and take it. How they can stop us? Let's say, okay, so how to play? Because it's a Zugzwang. Because if we play king a4 in this position, there is bishop c6. But we always can spend one tempo more to play king a3 then king a4, so that the bishop is not here, like it is in this position. They must play something. Okay, so let's say they play this, we play that, they play bishop a4, we play king there, and they deliver a check, we're forced to go back, after which they go back to e4. So this is how the game can well, this is how they can repeat the position and potentially hope for a draw. But it's a zugzwang, just king a3 and then king a4, because now the bishop moves. This is their only free piece that can move on this diagonal, and now king a4 works, and now bishop a4 is already too late. What about king c7, for example? No, okay, king c7, of course, loses, because bishop is not checkmate, so we can just take there and promote. They play this move. It is important to avoid a mistake and just retreat with the king to not get checkmated that way. Just retreat with the king and then promote.
That would be a great way to get checkmated.
Yeah. Okay, so that's why we can use zugzwang here too. That's why they were forced to play some move like d5 to spend the tempo. Because if the king reaches b5, it's game over. Bishop d5. This means that, so that's why king c3, bishop must go back to stop h7, and just king c4. And there is not much they can do. Let's train tactics a little. Your turn. What would you play here? King b5, or there is a better move?
Bishop f3.
Okay, bishop f3. So if they take, we promote h7 and then h8. b5 check. So if you take, it's knight d4. How do you? Well, you have to move to c3. Knight g5. Your turn.
Take the bishop.
h7.
So if you take the bishop, it's knight e4 check, and then the knight retreats back to stop the h7 pawn, h6 pawn. But if h7 first, it works. If they take with the bishop, it's a nice checkmate on c6. If they take with a knight, they just lose the bishop, and this is a losing position. Or you threaten this and this. Okay, so this is how the game ended. After h7, they resigned. So what does it tell us? The outside pass pawn can decide the game, but not always, and a lot depends on your king's position and your ability to maneuver with your pieces. For example, if you reach such a position when the enemy pieces are completely tied down, you can freely move your king from one side to the other side or improve your other pieces. So here, white improved their bishop by putting it to e7 and keep attacking there. And then improve their king by moving it to the queen side, attacking the pawn on b6. That was the key idea. Okay, so one more thing before we finish. As you remember, our workshops are free. However, if you enjoy this content and you would like to support it, you can do it either with PayPal or with Wise. For example, this is how it works. You go through this link, click this button, donate, then enter the amount you want to donate. It can be any amount, and then you click the PayPal button. It redirects you to enter your PayPal account. And the second way is to use Wise. If you have a Wise account, just use this link. So this is my username, but if you use the link, then you just need to click here, enter. I would appreciate any help. Also, don't forget that we have in 2 weeks we have a cycle of group sessions. I'm sure you will enjoy it because all previous cycles went really well, and chess students were mainly enjoying it. Yeah, I'm gonna update the lesson plan, but you can enroll here. So there are two ways to enroll, using by paying the whole amount or by playing on a monthly basis. If you play per month, it's this amount every month. So it's totally $147, a bit higher than rather than you pay everything immediately. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed today's workshop. The next will be next Sunday. If any questions, just message me to tricksofchess@gmail.com. And see you next Sunday. Thank you for coming.